Welcome to CYC News for today, the 29th of June 2014 and the 22nd of Bauna 17:30 a.m. I'm Leanne Gabriel.
And I'm Mark Gabriel. In today's headlines, 5,000 Christian families displaced from Iraq's largest Christian city, Daesh-affiliated terrorist group arrested in Egypt, Sudanese authorities re-arrest MeriamYehia despite court's decision of release, former Egyptian MP speaks out against attacks on Coptics, more calls to decrease sugar consumption, and football's Luis Suarez banned for 4 months for biting Giorgio Chiellini.
More than 5,000 Christian families were displaced on Thursday from Karakosh, the largest Christian city in Iraq. Clashes began yesterday between the forces of the Islamic State in Iraq, the Levant, supported by fighters from nearby Arab villages, and the Kurdish forces of Al-Zeravani, the commando forces of Kurdistan. Daesh forces tried to invade the city where about 50,000 Christians live, a small 1% of the population. Most of the Christian families fled to the Kurdish region after Daesh forces threatened the areas inhabited by the minorities in the Nineveh plain. The city was almost deserted except for elders, the sick, and a small number of other citizens. The Iraqi armed forces, which were found on the outskirts of the city, withdrew due to the escalation of the situation between the two sides.
Meanwhile, in Cairo, Egypt's National Security Agency has arrested a terrorist group of 6 Daesh-trained members who had just returned from Syria. The group was planning to target civilians and Copts in a number of different regions of Egypt. The Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, known as Daesh, is a jihadi organization that includes members from different nationalities. It adopts the Salafi jihadi thought as its members aim to restore the Islamic Caliphate and the application of Sharia. This organization has spread through Iraq and Syria. According to Al-Bawab News, Takfiri books, different currencies, and books on how to manufacture explosives were found with the men arrested. There were also photos of them fighting in Syria alongside Daesh members. The investigation revealed that the men planned to form an armed organization under the banner of Daesh in Sinai. They recruited young people for $1,000 in order to fight the army and police forces. They also planned to target civilians and Copts in the coming period in a number of different provinces.
A Christian woman sentenced to death for converting from Islam to Christianity was arrested with her family by Sudanese authorities at the Khartoum airport on Tuesday, despite a Monday court decision to release her. The BBC quoted sources as saying authorities arrest MeriamYehia, her husband Daniel, and her 2 sons at the Khartoum airport. Sources added that 40 security men dressed in civilian clothes, believed to belong to the Sudanese security services, arrested the family and took them to security headquarters in Khartoum. Sources say that Meriam and her family were travelling to the United States before being arrested in departure lounge at the airport. A Sudanese court sentenced Meriam Ibrahim to death on May 15 on charges of apostasy and conversion to Christianity, although her mother was a Christian and Meriam was raised a Christian.
Egyptian former MP Dr. Imad Gad, Deputy Director of Al-Ahram Center for Strategic Studies, sent a message to General Mohammed Ibrahim, Minister of the Interior, in which he said that the Coptic Christian experience in Egypt is a disgrace to the nation. Gad referenced the suffering of Copts in Upper Egypt from kidnapping for ransom, murder, displacement, and attacks on their churches and property. Gad said during his interview with Tahrir Egyptian TV on Wednesday that the current government confirms that protecting citizens and restoring the rule of law is a priority, so it must focus on what is happening in Upper Egypt. Gad believes that Upper Egypt is neglected by the state, stressing that Copts are kidnapped in Upper Egypt because radical Islamic movements believe they are a weak target. Gad pointed out that imposing tributes on Copts is an old tradition that was followed in the 1970s under the late President Anwar Sadat, who contributed to the formation of Islamic groups. These groups worked under the nose of security services to impose tributes on Coptic families in Menya and Asyut, Upper Egypt, and Sadat exploited this politically, Gad maintained.
According to BBC News, people need to halve their intake of added sugar to tackle the obesity crisis. A draft report by the British Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition says sugar added to food and on naturally present fruit juice and honey should account for 5% of the energy intake. Many fail to meet the old 10% target. The sugar industry said that demonising one ingredient would not solve the obesity epidemic. The body reviewed 600 different scientific studies on evidence of carbohydrates, including sugar, on health, to develop the new recommendations. One 330 milliliter can of fizzy drink would take a typical adult up to the proposed 5% daily allowance, without factoring in sugar from any other source. The target of 5% of energy intake from free sugars amounts to 25 grams for women, 5 to 6 teaspoons, and 35 grams, 7 to 8 teaspoons for men, based on the average diet.
Uruguay's Luis Suarez was hit with the biggest ban imposed at a World Cup on Friday morning as FIFA threw the book at one of football's most talented but controversial players for biting an opponent. The sport's governing body suspended Suarez from all football-related activity for 4 months and ruled he could not play in Uruguay's next 9 competitive games, meaning he is unlikely to appear in non-friendly matches for his country until 2016. The ruling ended Suarez's World Cup, and his lucrative off-field sponsorships are now in doubt. The 4-month ban means Suarez will have to sit out the first 2 months of the next English season. He will miss Liverpool's opening Premier League and Champions League matches. The 27-year-old striker must immediately leave his Uruguay teammates who are preparing for a World Cup last 16 match against Colombia on Sunday. FIFA also fined Suarez 100,000 Swiss francs, which is about $119,000, after 10 hours of deliberations by its independent disciplinary committee. Suarez is one of the most gifted players in world football, scoring 31 league goals in 33 games for Liverpool last season.
And that's all for CYC News today. Stay tuned for more Christian content on CYC. I'm Leanne Gabriel.
And I'm Mark Gabriel from the CYC studios in Sydney, Australia, wishing you a happy and blessed Pentecost. Good night and God bless.